Well, hello everybody, and welcome again to the Weirdly Magical podcast with Jen and Lou. I'm Louise, or Lou, Eddington. I'm an astrologer, a shamanic practitioner, and the writer of Modern Astrology, Harness the Stars to Find Your Soul's True Purpose. I offer soul astrology readings. I also do classes. I've got one coming up soon. If anybody wants to check it out, look at my Facebook page. And I also have a Patreon where I have different reward levels for people's patronage. All can be found at louiseeddington.com with one D. And Jen.
Hi everybody, I'm Jen Dushen. I'm an Akashic reader, healer, numerologist, teacher, creator of the illuminating journey cards. And I do writing and readings as well as readings from the cards, Akashic readings from the cards. And I have a group called Soul Pillow Salon. If you're interested in joining, that's for a fee every month, a low fee. You can find it on my website and jendushen.com. Oh yes, and my cards you can also find on my website, jendushen.com/illuminating journey cards.
And Jen's going to pull a card for us in a minute. But today we're going to be looking at the energy leading up to and of the second full moon, the second Libra full moon that takes place on April the 19th at 12:12 p.m. London time, Universal Time. And but let's have a look at do some housekeeping before we dive into all that, before Jen pulls a card. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe at your favorite podcast provider and or go to iTunes and give us a hopefully 5-star review. Plus, we'd also like to let you know that we now have a Patreon just for the podcast. For $5 a month, you can support our work, and we'll be introducing special patron-only content moving forward. And that's patreon.com/weirdly magical. And lastly, on each episode, we're going to feature a listener question. Questions need to be emailed to weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com, and one question will be chosen at random. No personal details will be shared on the podcast other than your first name. So send us your questions. And we do have a really good question today. So stay tuned for that. We'll be doing that after we've talked about the energies. So first of all, diving into the energies with one of Jen's wonderful, amazing cards.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I pulled two cards today that I think are really interesting. The first one is one of the tools, which is the wings, which kind of indicates this idea that we are taking flight. There's momentum taking us forward. So I get the energy or the message from the Akashic Masters that it's time to soar, basically. So we have to rise above our kind of small-mindedness. And for those of you who can't see, this is actually some wings, like angel wings. They're white wings. And then the other card that came up. Sorry?
That feels very appropriate for an air sign full moon, I have to say. So,
yeah, and it kind of, right, it creates the balance as well, if I think about it. Like when you're in flight, it means you are balanced, because in order to fly, your system, has to be balanced. There's the weight has to go wherever it goes in the right place in order to fly. And the second card is the 19, which I think is pretty appropriate too, because it is on the 19th, and we're in a 19 year. And so this picture here is really, it's a female gladiator, a warrior above a, what do you call one of those? Whoops. It flew forward like a coliseum or something, where it's like a place where there would be games played. And so this is kind of that energy of, there's this energy of this woman rising, or this gladiator kind of female, kind of rising into the air, kind of taking flight and accepting this idea that she is powerful, knowing her power and playing her game with that. So I think it's really quite incredible. There's also the chalice here, golden chalice with light coming out, and that is represents the female energy. The chalice actually represents the female energy. So that kind of feeding this idea of being in this lush playground, if you will, with the ability to soar above the whatever's happening and use divine energy and circle it into the earth. So I think
there's a lot of kind of warrior goddess gladiator energy in the energy of the full moon chart anyway, and between now and the full moon. So how appropriate yet again.
Yes. How fascinating. I love it. I love it that we've been given that message.
Yeah, me too. I always think of that as kind of Wonder Woman.
Yeah, I agree. There is that energy of Wonder Woman, that freedom, you know, when you think about the story, that she defied what was the normal situation and went and just kind of did whatever she felt was appropriate to bring about the change she desired. And I do think that's a great metaphor for our lives.
I do too. And for what's going on in the collective cosmos right now.
Definitely.
So just to say a little bit more about the full moon before we kind of just talk about the energies. I already said it's on April the 19th at 12:12 p.m. Universal time. And you'll have to do the conversions yourselves, guys. I can't get, my brain is not working in that way at the moment. I'm still being Neptune. But it's at 29 degrees of, well, the moon will be at 29 degrees of Libra. So it's the second full moon with the moon in Libra. As I said, the last one was at 0 degrees and this one is at 29 degrees. Some people are calling it a blue moon, and I thought that was 2 full moons in a month, but who cares? It's 2 Libra full moons, one at the first degree, one at the last degree. So we're ending a series of full moons that were at 0 degrees. We had 5 of them, and now we move from that last degree to first degree to the last degree, and they're going to start changing every month from now on. This full moon is not aspecting any of the major planets, but it is making an aspect to Juno in Gemini. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's also making an inconjunct aspect to Venus in Pisces. So we have a bit of goddess energy coming in there, pointing to that Libra moon as well. Now it's also, even though the moon itself is making few aspects, the Grand Cross that we've been talking about for the last couple of months rather, is being activated again. The moon is at 29 Libra. The dwarf planet Hermia is at 25 Libra, and that represents rebirth. Fixed star Spica or Spica, however you say it, is at 26 Libra. So we'll look at that a little bit as well. And it's all squaring really Pluto, the south node, and Saturn in Capricorn. And with Pluto and Saturn stationing this month to turn retrograde, I think the square is really activated at the moment. And of course 23 degrees is also Eris in Aries, which is widely conjunct the Sun, which is at 29 Aries. So we'll talk about all of that There's also a couple of other things. Mercury will finally be out of his shadow and have moved into Aries. He does that just a couple of days before the full moon. So there's a lot to talk about, really, even though the full moon is not strictly aspected to any major planets. So Jen, do you want to dive in with some initial thoughts?
Yes, I think it's actually pretty fascinating that we have this Libra moon twice, once in March and then which was the final zero moon. And here we've moved to the end of Libra and we're at 29 degrees. So it's kind of that kind of going backwards or forwards or whatever. It feels like backwards in some ways, but forwards. With the 29, which is that critical degree, so it has extra emphasis on the 29. And of course, the 29 adds up to an 11, so it's that portal. With the 29, we have this energy that comes in that is not only connecting us to others, so there's the energy of the collective on both, in that number. There's also the opportunity to shift our thinking about the world. That's there. The 11 and the 29 is about us being more true with what we see in the world as opposed to what we'd like to see in the world. So I think that's a very interesting aspect with the 29, that we are being invited to have this transformational experience. And of course, the 11 is a gateway. So there's an emphasis on this idea of stretching ourselves, finding a different way of cooperating, as well as seeing the equality of everything and everyone in the world. The other aspects I find interesting is that, and I mentioned, well, the card came up, so we're in a 19 calendar year, and the date of this full moon is a 19. So that's pretty fascinating because the 19 has the 9 and the 1, which means beginnings and endings. So we know this is a fully culminating experience. The 11, the gateway, the 2, that connection in a new way, and then the 19, the 1 and 9, so new beginnings and releasing, letting go of the old. And I feel like this is a lot to do with this idea of who we've been or who we've pretended to be so we can fit in with the world. So the world has been a certain way. It's certain people have run the world, and now we're being given an opportunity to release that kind of egoic belief that we are nothing or we don't have value or someone else is more important or we're being cheated, whatever our thing is, that our relationships are out of balance, because again, this is that Libra impact, and that we can start again with the idea that we get to create what we want to create. We get to shift into a place that we're actually activating what is important to us, what we value, what we what we want to see, that we are beginning this journey of, yes, I'm going to take charge of my life. I'm going to take responsibility for what I'm focused on, as opposed to listening to someone else who's been in charge.
Yeah. And, I love this emphasis on the cardinal signs again, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Because as I've spoken about many times on various things, this is all about our identity. Aries is the I am, me. I come first, that kind of energy. And Cancer is the family, really, who are we, and also our deep inner self. And Libra is about we. It's not about me, it's us, that kind of energy. And then Capricorn, that's being squared by the full moon, is about the institutions, the public. Who are we in public? Who are we collectively as kind of the man-made rules, all that kind of energy. So I really see this critical degree full moon as really kind of a fulfillment of sorts. We're always kind of on this permanent evolutionary path, so we're never quite done and there. But this point is really a point of fulfillment, to my mind, of readjustment of our identity. And Jen and I have talked about these new and full moons at 0 degrees and 15 degrees, and really it all kind of started last October, as we talked about last time. And since then, we've, if you look back at that time from October to here, I feel different in the world in many subtle ways. I'm not intrinsically changed, but I think we're all changing our values, how we fit into the collective, how we view, how we've got to shift the collective. Then of course there's also the resistance to the change that a lot of people are not doing it, because that takes us to Jeffrey Wolf-Green's, he was a famous evolutionary astrologer, the stages of consciousness, the herd state. They're kind of in resistance to this change they feel coming upon them. And I do not mean that in a horrible way. It's just, we see it in our institutions, the resistance to these changes that's coming. We see it in people. If you're listening to the podcast, you're probably not in the herd state because you wouldn't be listening to the podcasts that talk about the things that we talk about. But we're kind of having this awakening of our identities as we move into the new paradigm, I believe.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that's what this is talking about, in the sense that what's exciting about the fact that when we awaken to the idea of who we are in a bigger sense, that we are equal players, that we are creators, that we get to create the material that we desire, it takes a burden away from us. Like, we've lived with a burden that we're supposed to live life, that we're not creators, we're supposed to deny who we are and accommodate people, right? That's the Libra aspect. Like, either I'm going to bend over backwards to give you whatever you want so you'll be happy, or because that's what I'm supposed to do, or I'm going to do the opposite, which is I'm going to try to disempower you. I'm going to make you do what I want. I'm going to bend you to my will. Mm-hmm. And this is very much that Pluto-Saturn aspect, right? So the idea of how we've lived in a fearful society with very rigid rules that only a few people had the keys to, to escape those rules. And now we go like, wait a minute, I don't need to put all that emphasis on something else or someone else's beliefs. What do I believe? So there's a, some people are still, and we all have our own relationship to fear, or how much we're willing to still hang on to what has been the way we've lived. And we are being kind of pushed into this place of going, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, or I can't do this anymore. I want to have my freedom, right? We have Uranus right there with the sun. I want to have my freedom. I'm going to do freedom at any cost. And of course, Libra on the opposite side where the moon is, I want to, make sure we get on. And yes, how do we do this in this new world?
Yeah, how do we integrate it? And there we have Eris, my favorite planet, still there at that 23 degrees of Aries, basically conjunct the sun, and almost exactly squaring Pluto right now, really shaking the table and rattling the cage of that identity of how we've seen ourselves before, and also how, not only how we see ourselves, but how we present ourselves into the world, what we put out there and what we see. It's Aries is very linear, very direct. It's very much, as I said at the start, the I am. And Eris is really shaking that up. Interestingly, just to kind of mention one ahead a little bit, Venus will conjunct Eris on May the 10th. So that's another date for people to look forward. And Venus rules Libra. So I always see the universe as kind of preparing us in the cycles for the next thing. This full moon could be preparing us for when Libra's ruler hits Eris and really shakes things up a little bit.
Yes, and that's very interesting you say that, because one of the things that's interesting about the numerology is that the day of this full moon is in 17 universal day, and May will be a 17 universal month. 17 is the number of kind of leaving a legacy or establishing something that's going to last for a long time. So it's a really it's a number that pushes us to lay some kind of new foundation down and go, okay, right, this is the way forward. So I find it interesting that this moon is, bringing that energy in and activating that. Because this month we do have some really interesting numbers. We have the 1 from the 19, the day, right? We have the 3 and 4, 3 from the year, 4 from the month of April. And then we have 7, which is from the month of April. Those are the universal number is 7. The regular number calendar is 4. And the year, universal is 3. And so those numbers are very sacred, the 3 and 4 and 7. And plus, when you add 3 and 4, you make 7. There's all kinds of geometric energies around the 3, 4, and 7. So it's, and having the 1, this idea of being able to let go of the parts of ourselves that have kept us trapped, the kind of mind thinking. And of course, that's what this is all about. It's about changing our minds. It's about having a different mindset and losing that attachment we have to the past. It's fascinating. So yeah, that 17 is like, what if we are leaving a legacy, if we are in a phase now where everything's changing or anything is possible, right? We're entering a world where anything is possible. Like, we get to decide the kind of relationship we want with ourselves and our world and the people we connect with, and how we want to show up in the world and what we want to create. Then we have to be the ones to put those seeds down and say, this is who I am. And that comes from our values, right? Which is that whole Venetian, Taurian aspect is what do we value? What is worth? What is our worth? And what are we going to put our attention to?
And, other things worth noting are Mercury, I mentioned prior to this, will have just moved into Aries on this full moon, finally leaving the shadow of that Pisces retrograde that was magical, but kind of weird. And on this full moon, he's less than a degree. The trickster is less than a degree from Chiron, the key to healing, or the wounded healer, or whatever you want to call him. And a lot of people think this is about healing the divine masculine in Aries. I think it's about the masculine in all of us, and by that I mean, healing our really strong will, healing our need to dominate, all the kind of how would I describe it? The less kind masculine characteristics that have dominated the patriarchy for the last thousands of years, about the whole doctrine of discovery and all those things about dominating the earth and all things like that kind of energy. So this again is nothing about men, it's more about how we think It's more about how we are in the world. It's about healing this need to rule and dominate, and moving to this Libra and Cancer, the softer things, the moon in Libra, the Cancer North Node, moving to realizing we are all in it together, and we have to take into account the other and not just all be me first.
Yes, well, I think what's kind of fascinating is this is true when you look at that aspect of Mercury, which who is at 28, it's a 2 degrees, right? Remember, we're talking about the 11, which is a 2. That's the communication, the connection, or setting boundaries that Mercury is at. I think that speaks to that idea that Mercury wants to work with the wounds, right? So it's about, and also with Mars being in Gemini, which is, Mercury ruled, this idea of there's a lot of things that need to be said. And, I think you mentioned, Lou, earlier, war with words, this idea that we need to express the things we're angry about instead of that typical way we've been, like, this is the way it is, we don't have an opinion, we don't have a right. Like, we've been buying into the system. Yes, the system has controlled us, but we've also bought into it. And when we say to ourselves, when we repeat those things like, there's nothing we can do, they always are in power, and all of these things, we are re-establishing these same stories. So we need to change the story. We need to take that idea of Mercury, who wants to express, wants to kind of bring this energy into the mind of change, that we have the ability to change our mind, that we have our ability to say we are not disempowered by somebody else's opinion, that we can take a different opinion. And I think that, to me, is the key here between Chiron and Mercury being together and being influenced at the same time by that Mars. Like, there's that anger and that kind of forward motion, that fire to go, I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to express things that need to be heard. At the same time, we have to go, well, when do we move beyond just talking about our pain? Like, there is that aspect, because I see a lot of times, in the world we're in right now, people will talk about something. There'll be something about woman expressing an idea, and then some guy comes along and says, well, blobbity, blobbity, blob. And then all the women go, stop mansplaining and that. And then men get all like wounded about it. Like, I didn't do anything. And then everyone kind of goes around in these rings about, yes, but you don't understand, you're doing this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that we're spinning our wheels by trying to explain to people who don't get it. Like, that's a complete waste of time. Like, if we have something to say, if we've been in pain, we should express it, but we don't need to justify what we're expressing or explain it to people that don't understand, because that's a lot of energy wasted. Instead, we go, okay, this person doesn't get it, fine. If they want to know more, we can talk about it, if they really want a discussion. But if they just want to keep saying that they're wounded, maybe, one of the things we need to remind people that this story isn't about you. So, if you want to feel wounded, that's your choice.
To kind of expand on that a little bit,
Yeah.
Mercury and Mars are actually in what's called mutual reception. In other words, Mercury rules Gemini and and Mars rules Aries, and they're each in each other's signs. And when planets are in mutual reception, that means they're really kind of working together. And the good thing about Gemini and Mercury's meeting with Chiron, so I'm kind of saying the same thing, just expanding in a way.
No, that's good.
Is that, it's a real opportunity, because Gemini is the sign of the twins. It's an opportunity to, yes, speak your truth and to be very direct, but also to look at all sides in Gemini and to heal that blinkered perspective that can be very Mercury and Aries. I think the Mercury coming up to the Chiron, up to this full moon, is a great opportunity to stop being so blinkered. It doesn't mean you have to agree with the other side. It just means you have to be prepared to open your mind and listen. And you know me, I'm always paying attention to the conversations I'm around me, and in real life and on Facebook and whatever. And this morning there was a very productive discussion in a group I'm in that's a local kind of current affairs group, we call it, politics basically, where actually there was a really productive discussion. Nobody actually agreed with the other one, but there was no fighting. There was a lot of listening. And this is really good about what this mutual reception coming up. So
exactly, that's the power of this. We have the ability, because we don't need to be afraid of expressing ourselves, but we need to focus on where are we spending all this energy. If we're fighting with people saying you don't get it, it's just a waste of energy. You want to say, okay, let's just talk about what we can change. It kind of reminds me of a story I just heard. It was somebody was talking about this this lawyer or mediator in that charges this huge amount of money, but because he's so successful, what he does is he works at bringing people together. So whatever the big differences are, they kind of puts it on the side and starts to work on the smaller, like, oh, well, can we agree about this? And can we agree about this? So tiny little steps that we can agree on. And so when you get to the big elephant in the room, it doesn't feel so bad, because everyone feels like, I've been in the conversation. Usually what happens is we feel injured because no one's listening to us. So then we get all defensive, and we're just, it's just hot air instead of something that's actually making a connection.
And of course, Libra is the sign of the mediator as well. So, we have that showing up in the moon's placement on the full moon itself. At its highest, Libra is the diplomat.
Right, and yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I think this whole idea of what's happening with Saturn and Pluto, all this energy coming in, is this idea that we have Saturn, which is just this kind of power thing, or whatever, the right of power, the right to do whatever I say I want to do, right? And this is the way it is. And then we have on the other side, right, the Uranus and all of that, where it's like, we're not going to, I want change, right? I don't care. Which is that Libra is like, I want to be kind, or I want to be nice. And the other side is, I don't care. I just want to get my results. And I think this is a very interesting way to think about it, not from the point of view it's just like everybody move out of the way, but more from that aspect of, if we are going to have change, which we know we are, why don't we agree that this is an uncomfortable time we're in, and that we're going to have to put aside our need to be right or worry about our feelings being hurt, and go, what is it that we're working towards? Let's see where we can connect to make change.
Yeah.
Because we're in a karmic time, right? This is karmic stuff. So this is the result of choices. Like when we look at the patriarchy, this is the result of their continuing to control people, and then eventually what happens is people like, oh no, this is it, I'm done with being controlled. And then you have this blow up, and then people on the side that were pushing everyone down were like, well, why? I didn't do anything. But it's an accumulation of things that you did and that the other side agreed to. Like, we didn't agree to it going, let's have a conversation and I'll agree to it. It was more like, I'll agree to it because I'm being
I won't say anything.
Right.
Do it. and I can't emphasize enough the fact that dwarf planet Haumea, these dwarf planets, I'm actually taking a class in them by somebody that's done a lot of research on them, and their influence is showing up so much since their discovery. And Hermia is at 25 Libra on the full moon, and she's conjunct the moon with the fixed star speaker in the middle, or spiker. and Hermia is rebirth, and she is literally, rebirthing our collective self. She's squaring Pluto for a long time, and all that, and opposing Eris as well over in Aries, who's shaking things up and causing a bit of discord to shake things up. Jen and I were talking a little bit before. We're definitely getting a big taster, foreshadowing, whatever you want to call it, of energy that people have been talking about for a long time, and that's January 2020, when Saturn and Pluto are conjunct with a whole load of other stuff in Capricorn. And there's a lot of fear around what's coming, and I'm not going to say any of it's going to be easy, but it also has the potential to rebirth something pretty amazing. Historically, when Saturn and Pluto have been conjunct, there is usually a collapse of countries, systems, whatever. But usually what it is replaced with is better, at least for a few hundred years, because empires generally do collapse, and then because they get corrupt and they get out of control, and they have to be kind of taken apart to be rebirthed, and that's what we're going through.
Yes, right, exactly. And when you talk about this idea of power, right, if we think about power, or the right to power, and this struggle for power, is when we recognize the power within us, we can step back from somebody else trying to overpower us. And that's really where we are now. I was listening to something, and it was in 1520 was the last time, right, when Pluto and Saturn were together in Capricorn. And that was when the church was in power. And it took Martin Luther King, the Reformation, to bring about this idea. And it was through education, right? This idea of bringing in the idea that people could read, and so they could not just trust what other people were saying, like, oh, it's just the church is going to translate. And we're in that same place now in a different way. Like, we've got all these people translating to us what success looks like, what life's supposed to look like, who's supposed to be in power. And we have this opportunity to go, I'm not in agreement with you. That may be your belief, and that's what maybe you want to do, but I'm not going to be one of those people going along with your story anymore. I'm taking myself out of the picture. And I think this is what this is all about. The wounding is the pain of not being heard, regardless of whether you're male or female. We've all kind of hooked our energy or our wagon to this idea of, who's in charge and how the system works. What's reality? We've hooked it to somebody else's idea of reality, and now we kind of have to go, okay, well, reality is kind of bullshit. We created ourselves. And so if I'm the creator of my reality, what does this look like? And we have all these different points. And I think that's why we have so much female energy coming in, because that's the imagination. That's the energy that allows us to trust us, because in a female there is birth. You create, you can gestate, you create a child, you hold the hearth. And that was one of the reasons why women were so put upon and silenced, because a powerful woman can do all that and
of course
find a way to work together instead of destroying that.
And of course in 1520, whatever it was, we weren't actually also moving into a new astrological age. So
True. Very true.
So this is even bigger than then. So
Exactly.
everything's changing. I love this whole chart, to be honest. It's full of it is full of challenge, you know. But it's full of potential too. We have Black Moon Lilith conjunct Neptune in Pisces on the full moon, with Venus having just passed over Neptune as well. So, you know, this is kind of bringing in the female energies of peace and love and compassion, and all that kind of energy is being brought more into our psyche. Then, you know, I mentioned Hermia. I also want to mention this fixed star speaker is, you know, she's a really she's one of the beautiful of the fixed stars. She's supposed to give success and a sweet disposition and love and all that kind of stuff. But she's also of the nature, apparently, of Venus and Mars together. So she's bringing in this kind of you know, bringing together of these gender identities within us, which Venus rules the Libra, where the moon is, and Mars rules Aries, where the sun is on the full moon. So I love that she's bringing the energies of both sides of the full moon, if you like, in together on the full moon.
Yeah, that's quite brilliant. And I saw there was another fix. Well, it's an asteroid here. Asteroid Hybris. Hybris? Hybris.
I don't know that one.
Is at 28 degrees Libra, 28:47. Warns against foolish pride, overconfidence, and arrogance. So this is kind of, for me, what I feel and what I hear is this moon is about this idea of, you know, it's a rebalancing. So it's the idea that the things we have done are going to, we're going to have to take the consequences of the choices we've made by being, you know, prideful or, you know, ignoring other people's voices or needs and ignoring our own inner truth. So it's like the things we've done out of stubbornness or needing to hang on to an old idea is going to come up. Like, we know there's a lot of stuff happening on the political plane. There's been a lot of lying and covering up and treating the public as if they're stupid. And so all of that is going to kind of come home to, you know, roost, or whatever they say. You know, it's going to, we're going to have to deal with that. And that's a good thing. Like, that's the good thing about us being irritated or stirred up, is that we're choosing different ways to be. You know, we're experiencing anger for a reason, and we need to use the anger correctly to kind of wake us up from this idea that it's okay. Like, we've got to stop, you know, I hear people all the time going around, and it's true, stop apologizing, stop explaining things or accepting things that don't feel right just because, oh, well, it's just so-and-so and they didn't mean it. I don't care who it is. The point is, whether they meant it or not is immaterial. Like, if they truly are in agreement that they did something in an older time when opinions were different, then they need to apologize in a way that makes sense to us. I'm not asking for them to, you know, throw themselves off a rock or anything. All I want, right?
A humble apology.
Right, a genuine, humble apology. I really didn't, you know, I didn't realize it, or, you know, and I really, truly am sorry. And let's let's start over. And then I want them to show me that they are willing to actually start over, not just using words. Yeah. They must show me by their actions that they actually believe in inclusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I don't think that that's hard. You know, I'm kind of astonished at how many women, especially, because women are the ones, we are the ones that create, but we're also the ones that maintain old ideas. Like, all of this patriarchy has been built on the back of women keeping quiet and holding the system and punishing other women for not following what the men say. And we have to pull ourselves out of that place. This is where we are now. This is hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but we have to hold ourselves accountable.
It's kind of odd how it's showing up really as well. I mean, you know, we're talking about the Joe Biden thing here, let's be honest. And it was women were defending him mostly, more than men.
Yes.
Men
I know.
got it. I was like, what's going on? This is topsy-turvy. Oh.
Right. And that's the part we have to look at, this idea that we have to maintain or make excuses for somebody. Like, why should men have a special deal? Because they didn't know what they were doing. Why should we be the ones saying they need that special treatment?
But we also don't want them to throw themselves on their sword, like you said.
No, exactly. That's ridiculous.
Just want awareness that it wasn't appropriate, an apology, and change.
Right. Moving on and showing you actually mean that your apology, you actually get it. And if you don't get it, go get some education, go humble yourself. And none of us know everything, and it's okay to learn something new. It's okay. To me, I think the best kind of leader is somebody who can go, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Let me get some instruction from somebody who has experience.
Yeah. Don't turn around the next day and joke about it on the stage.
I know that is so, but that then again is, I've been humiliated, but now when I meet my peers, I've just got to act like big guys.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. None of us should be. That's the hubris that we've got to get rid of, is that idea that maybe in his heart he does feel genuinely, I didn't see any apology, but the point is to go and joke with your friends is like, okay, everybody, I know I made a fool of myself, but everything's the same. Let's just remember everything's the same. Like, we're all in this club together and women are beneath us.
But for all of you guys feeling sorry for him, I did write about it, and I did write an article called "It's Bigger Than Biden," because it is. He's a representative of these patriarchal attitudes, and so
right. And his behavior, like this is, but it doesn't matter whether it's him or us or anyone else. We all have the opportunity. We will all be confronted with our stuff, right? Yeah. Daily we go out there. When we're doing the spiritual work and all of that. People are telling us about our stuff, and we have an opportunity to open our hearts and go, let me hear, let me see, is there something I can do different? Can I be more attentive? Can I do something to humble myself and to be open? Or should I just pretend like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you're an idiot, I know better than you, and just laugh it off? Like, we all do. We all have that opportunity, and we're being given that opportunity for a reason.
And that brings me to the other things happening in the charts, the retrogrades. As we record this on the 8th, Ceres is going retrograde tonight at 14 degrees of Sagittarius on the Great Attractor, it's called, that's supposed to kind of attract stuff from the universe.
Beautiful.
And Jupiter is next to go retrograde on the 10th. Then then Pluto goes retrograde. I think it's on the 9th. 24th, is it? And then Saturn goes retrograde on the 29th. So after the full moon. But by the time we finish this month, we're going to have all 4 of those retrograde. We've been, apart from Mercury's retrograde in Pisces, we've been through quite an extended period of all planets moving direct. So how I kind of see this.
Mercury. Sorry, yeah, right. Yeah. Mercury. Did you say Mercury's retrograde?
I said apart from his retrograde in Pisces.
Okay, sorry.
All the other planets have been direct for quite some time. And so we've been in a very forward moving kind of position. Here we're having this this period now where we're having this foreshadowing of all this energy to come, or a big taste of what's to come, of this changing of our collective identity. And then we're having all these 4 retrogrades, and then Neptune will turn retrograde later as well, and Uranus will. And we're going to have to start really reflecting over the rest of the year how we've changed in this portal Jen and I have been talking about, of all these new and full moons, how we've changed, how we want to change further, what we still need to work on, all that kind of stuff. So
yes, I mean, it's pretty exciting if you think about it. The fact that Pluto and Saturn on either side of the south node, which right now is for the full moon will be at 21 degrees, which is about our truth, and that's like kind of draining the abscess, right? Whatever it is that we've done.
21 actually. 21.
Oh wow, yes, 21. So that's really fascinating that it's this number, which also invites us to find joy, like just let go of it instead of sitting with it and feeling bad and punishing ourselves over and over, to release so we can make room for all this new energy coming in, so we can be feel the beauty of having the freedom of our voices and being able to realize new things by changing our minds and inviting potential. It's very interesting, and because of course Pluto and Saturn move pretty slowly, they're going to be already probably starting to slow down and internalize by the time we have this full moon.
I'd say Pluto's starting really already.
Yes, because it's on the 24th. So this is the interesting thing about transformation, or the draining, or kind of the death, because Pluto brings death, right? It's the death of old ideas or old ways of doing things, changing the structure. So it does feel like there's going to be some kind of withering, but also expansion around it, right? We go towards this idea of being more connected to ourselves.
Anyway, so complex, but because we read the symbols now and then move on to this fabulous question that we have?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, I'll let you read the Sabian symbol first if you're ready.
I am ready. So the Scorpio 1 degree.
Shouldn't it be Libra 30?
Oh, Libra 30? Well, I don't have that. Then you're going to have to, I'm going to have to. I didn't go to 30.
Okay.
I didn't know there was a 30.
Yes, they said. Anyway, so I'll read it, and
all right,
you can give me what you think of it. It's 3 mounds of knowledge on a philosopher's head, the fulfillment of man's power of understanding at whatever level of existence the person operates. And I talked about the levels of consciousness. A true philosopher is a man who is able to understand, not merely know, the processes of life as he comes to experience them directly. He is the man of wisdom, different indeed from the man of science. For while there must be knowledge before understanding, knowledge alone can be both barren and destructive of wisdom. I'm not going to read it all, I think. The key word at the end is a holistic approach to knowledge based on universals. So really, I think that speaks to what we've been talking about. It's kind of this critical degree of fulfillment of a lot of things we've learned, this kind of thing over.
Yeah. The other interesting thing about it is that the 12, we're in a universal 12 year, 2 + 1 + 9, and that makes a 3. 1 + 2 is 3. That energy is about activating knowledge, which is what we've been talking about, the idea of doing things. We can have a theory about how we can all get along and what the right thing is, But in practice, it's very different. And that's how we gain wisdom, is when we're doing things. So when we do things with joy, or without the idea of needing to control something, the outcome, other people, then we experience wisdom, right? Because that's what knowledge put to work is. So I find that fascinating and it's the 30 degrees. So that's really interesting. It's another 3.
And the Chandra symbol is a black rooster, proclaiming the gospel of the complex interplay of light and darkness, invoking the power of the soul's journey through all the worlds, poised at the brink of every conceivable possibility, but lingering over the darkness, that which is not yet complete, that which still must be encompassed. Motivated sharply to affirm and acknowledge all sides of life, every possible variation, you are quintessentially driven to bring everything up and out, the creative artist who purges whatever is in there, the veteran life journeyer who discovers yet again how much more there is than anybody has yet to admit, and the astute observer who delights in the multiplicity, the baffling complexity, the unresolvable open-ended nature of it all. You get almost perverse thrill in overturning partial and fragmentary, naive and simplistic false starts, most vitally committed to coming up with the hidden element and making sure that it finds its place and that it is done justice to, but not dwelled upon overlong, because here comes the next and the next. The journey itself is the point, and each juncture is the destination. That was a long one, but that kind of harks back to something I said earlier in our talk about this kind of being a with it being the last degree, we're kind of at a peak of some transformation in our identities that we've been going through, and it's a juncture though, and we're still on this evolutionary journey. So
right, it's a process, and I think we have to remember and not take each moment seriously. This is kind of putting a lot of stock into a single moment or a single thing that's happening, instead of seeing it as the evolution, as the process, as the journey. Important. I think shall we see if the Akashic Masters have something to say about this?
Yeah, and then we'll do Dan's question.
Okay, so ask me the question, Louise.
Oh, what question am I asking? What do the Akashic Masters have to say about, I'm going to go back to the Sabian symbol, about this holistic approach to knowledge that's contained within this full moon?
So the thing they're saying about it is, when you think about holistic or holy in the sense of being complete or whole, which is the idea of perfection. So humans tend to think of perfection as everything has to look perfect, but in universal perfection, it is it's the connection between the spirit and the mind and body. So there is what happens is, it's like when you're a child and you discover something, right? But it can be like the smallest thing. You can discover an ant walking along a path and go, wow, look at that, that's amazing. And that energy that comes from being so delighted with life creates that what do you call, like the juncture of wisdom, of kind of being holistic. It's like I can feel the energy, the joy, the delight of being alive and seeing and experiencing life in my body with my mind and with my heart. So it wakes you up, basically. So they're saying if you can experience everything through that moment of being present and in delight, even if it looks shitty and you've got to work at it, then you experience that holistic approach. Does that make sense?
It does, perfectly. Because there is an awful lot of creative energy out there at the moment, with all this female energy coming in and the watery energy of Pisces and stuff. So it does, makes very much.
Yeah, there's what they're saying is there's a concrete aspect, and it's kind of like what's happening is, if you imagine there's a concrete, or like, you know, what's coming up, that song, Joni Mitchell, they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. And so what I'm seeing is this picture of, you know, the concrete is kind of coming up in different ways, like this, you know, like imagination, and plants are pushing it up, and people are taking machines and moving it and putting it up. And so some people are kind of focused on, oh, there's so much concrete and this is so much work. And others, which is more of the delighted approach, is, yay, what's under the concrete? Let me help. Let me, you know, oh, what are we going to plant? Like this excitement, or this idea that, wow, there's all this land that's opening up that has been closed to us. Like we didn't even know there was land beneath the concrete. And now we suddenly have an opportunity to kind of create new life by grouping together and finding things that delight us, or each taking our own little block and piece and going, okay, I'm going to create something.
Very good. Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so our question, and please send us our questions. We're loving that we've added this to our podcast, but we need your questions to be able to talk about them. So weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com. But we do have a fabulous question from Dan S. And Dan says he has a question that's been bothering him for some time now, ever since getting deep into evolutionary astrology and feeling the currents in his own life situation. He asks, is it possible to miss the chance to evolve? When life presents me with challenges or situations that I can feel on a soul level are karmic in nature and are meant to help my evolution, can I miss those chances by resisting? Can the cosmic portal close without me taking the opportunity for growth? Or is it just that resisting will result in a tougher path toward learning that lesson? Now, it's a complex question, and I'm just going to initially say, regarding that last part, is it just that resisting will result in a tougher path towards learning that lesson? That's been my experience, and that, to my mind, is the value of the work that I do as an astrologer. And you know, astrology is a tool. You know, there's other tools that come to the same kind of conclusions and give the same opportunities for growth. I feel that, you know, knowledge of it and help, well, even if you don't have exact knowledge of the astrology or the tools, if you feel this push to evolve and grow, if you resist it and say, no, I like it where I am, I'm staying, I'm not doing anything, there is a tendency that there will be a tougher path. Particularly Pluto transits I'm thinking of, you know, they're kind of transform or be transformed. You know, it's that kind of energy. But Pluto's relentless, and if you are resisting him, he kind of throws things up in your face that kind of say, hey, you're not listening. Here's another chance. You're not listening. And I don't feel, it's not that the cosmic portal closes exactly. You'll just find it harder, I think, if you don't face the life's evolutionary journey with a bit of courage to change and grow. So that's my answer.
Yeah, so it is a great question. First of all, for me, the point of karma is, I think we need to talk about it a little bit, is that karma is just unfinished business. So it's not good or bad. It's just choices. This is what karma does, is gives us it's throwing us the ability to develop our free will and build our courage and just be more adventurous. Kind of what we've been talking about a little bit, this idea that in order to have a different experience, you need to take risk. So it's not demanded of you that you do it. Yes, your path, what will happen is you're going to do the same thing over and over. So what feels shitty now or challenging now, and you want something different, and you're giving an opportunity, but it doesn't look like the way you want it to look. So you say, no, thanks. I'll wait for the next cab. This isn't my cab. You don't know how long you're going to wait, right? I mean, what if the next cab is 24 hours later, right? So it's what you have to experience waiting for the next thing. On the other hand, if you're not ready, maybe that's what you want. So I don't think it's necessary to beat yourself up and say, oh, I missed that opportunity. Like if you're looking at something in the past, like if I was younger, if only I did that. Sometimes we don't have the question until we're ready. So the point is, you are aware of these things now. So do what you can to say yes when they show up, because it is true that if we get a tap, like they often say, the universe taps us on the shoulder and, go with the tap. Say you want it easy. If you're saying, no, I'm refusing the tap, the next time they may knock you down or, drag you down the road. So it's like, okay, go with the tap. Like as soon as you start recognizing or knowing stuff is happening, start to work on the languaging you're telling yourself or opening your heart. Do the things. That's the point of having these divination tools. Is you can prepare, you can recognize, you can begin to welcome change instead of fearing it, right?
But
because conditioning.
You can only grow as much as you are ready for and as much as your awareness is ready for. So, and there is no good or bad or right or wrong. It is, I look upon the soul's evolutionary journey as this spiral kind of thing. And, transits, he's obviously aware of what transits are. They trigger various points in our life, but well, I keep saying it, you're never there. You're never like gone, oh, I've learned every lesson in my life and now I'm this supreme enlightened being. Only it works that way. Yeah, just go easy on yourself. You're not missing it. You did what you could do at the time. So
right. And then you decide now, what do I need to do? How, take some risk now with the things you see instead of worrying about what you did or didn't do in your past. It's like, I always think, like, if I look back and I say to myself, oh, you screwed up. If only you'd done that a few years ago, look, you'd be so much further ahead. But the truth is, I've really had to sit with myself, and as with all this change we've gone through, and go, you know what? All of that stuff was exactly right. I needed all of that to come to this point. And by being kind and compassionate to yourself, it gives you the courage to take the ride. The next time it comes around, you go like, here it is, I'm going to jump on. Or, maybe I'll get some help to jump on. Let me deal with some of the things that I know that could trip me up. So this is how you need to use this information to help you take the steps coming, not the ones. It doesn't matter about the past, because it's, even though there is no time, we are still living in a world where there is time. And so we don't want to waste our energy looking backwards, because we could miss the next ride.
And, awareness is part of the growth, and just awareness of what's happening to you and the challenges helps you to face it in a different way. So it's a very complex issue, but, I would not worry that you've ever missed any chances to evolve at all.
Yeah, right.
Jen's right. Yeah,
exactly. And I think just having the question shows that you are interested in evolution and you want to change. So just change the focus. Again, instead of thinking badly about yourself, think about how you can help yourself get to the next place, how you can shift your mind so you're more open.
And joke
That's
about
key.
it, and lighten about it, like we talked about in the other thing.
That's right.
I am the queen of Pluto transits. My chart is such that Pluto has been over everything apart from my moon. And then I've had it Pluto opposite my moon. and you know, I just laugh about Pluto transits. Most people fear them, but I just go, resistance is futile. You have to just like joke about it and just go, okay, I'll do the best I can, you know, with the tools and the awareness I have available to me at this point. You know, Pluto transits are often a time where you might go into some kind of therapy or take up some kind of practice like this to help you evolve. But you can only do what you're aware of at the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, another thought that comes to mind is if you think about your soul having plotted this plan, like with your astrology or any of the divination for your life, just remember this is just an idea, because your soul doesn't know when you're coming in what choices you're going to make. So it's a guide, right? So it's like you decide how to use and enjoy. Like, this is the key here. You just have to enjoy it, even when it's things you don't necessarily want. Just make the most of it. Have a great time. When you're in the misery of Pluto or whatever, just enjoy the fact that, yeah, I'm actually enjoying the juiciness of being miserable.
And he's not always miserable, to be honest.
No, he isn't. I'm just using that as an example. I think, to me, I actually am not afraid of the idea of change or shifts or transformation. I think that's wonderful. I love it. Bring it on. That's exciting to me.
But maybe that's because I have every Pluto transit in the book. I'm like, yeah, more.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. We just get used to the idea that it's okay to, you know, have a different experience.
Exactly. All right, I think we've talked long enough. How can people find you, Jen? Just remind everybody before we...
So you can find me at jenduchenne.com. If you're interested in my group, it's jenduchenne.com, Soul Pillow Salon. That's my monthly group. And you can also find me on Facebook and like pretty much everywhere, Instagram, and I'm also on Medium. I'm also writing, trying to write more.
Awesome. And I'm Louise Eddington. You can find me louiseeddington.com. I write almost daily on medium.com, but my patrons also get all my writing and more at patreon.com, Louise Eddington. I will be moving from Patreon, actually, though, to a membership portal on my own site. Patreon's changed the rules, so I'm going to do... Yeah, and we've been having more issues, so I'm going to move to a different thing. But if you signed up at Patreon, you're going to get moved anyway, without you having to do anything. But yeah, I have a Facebook group, Planetary Magic Cafe, Facebook page, Louise Eddington Astrologer. I'm on Instagram. Google my name. You can find me everywhere. I'm prolific. I talk all the time on social media. So enjoy this full moon. You know, we're entering quite a challenging period, but the full moon itself has some beautiful things going on. So it's all helping us towards this new paradigm.
Yeah, I actually think that we are being given the courage and enlightenment to go forward with joy, to really begin to get curious. And you know, it's a great feeling when you can throw off all the old thinking and it's all new.
And it's a great feeling to look at the shit show that's going on in the world and go, it's all going to be okay.
That's right.
Anyway, so it's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.